Hello, everybody. My name is Dean of the InkGuild, and welcome back to another episode of Shorthand. Today, we're going to be looking at part 2 of Gabe, Alex, and I's collection of favorite characters in the season finale of season 1. So, with all that being said, let's not waste too much time and get right into the highlights. I talked about in part 1 that, or I guess I'll start. So I talked about in part 1 that Nathan Drake was one of the 3 big PlayStation exclusive protagonists that got me hooked into playing video games a lot more seriously. Nathan Drake was one, Sackboy from Little Big Planet was another, and my first pick for this favorite characters list is Kratos. In a previous episode, I talked about how Kratos from God of War has had a lot of significance on me, but everyone knew the story of Kratos. Like, he had, in exchange for winning against the barbarians, he had slain, or he had taken up allegiance with the god of war Ares in Greek mythology, and it's like a long epic saga. Like I've said with Uncharted 4, the story continues, it evolves actually, and it takes Kratos to Norse mythology, where he's raising a son, and he is raising I guess in raising a son he is trying to be better than who he was, which is something that's it hits home a lot for me, because having seen this character grow up, or having seen this character as I was growing up, it's I always associated Kratos as this but after God of War 2018, it shows just how much development has been in this character. And Gabe, you and I have talked about just how impactful God of War is as a story alone in a previous episode, but as a character, and I guess especially as who he is right now, there is so much honesty and I guess strength in Kratos right now as a father, because you kind of recognize where he's come from, and not just me, from anyone who has played the God of War games, and even people who haven't played them before, that he has struggled through a lot, and that he is trying to change his image, because it's not about him anymore, it's about his son. He wants to make a good example for his son, and a lot of people, I guess parents more so, can kind of attest to that. It's a really important message it's just a really important message, and it echoes the sentiment from the game creators that have created this character and wanted to adapt him for a more mature audience, right? And I say mature audience, there's still a lot of violence and there's still a lot of blood and gore that goes into these games, but I mean mature in the sense that it's not just about that anymore. I guess that's my first pick on it. I don't really have much else to say, so I'll hand it over to Alex.
My first pick for this episode is another character on media that has been, I guess, reimagined many, many times, and that's Cheshire Cat from Alice in Wonderland. Cheshire Cat's one of my long-time favorite characters. I think back to when I was a small child, and I loved Cheshire Cat. I have two plushies, one from Disneyland, one from the Disney store, that I just have in my room constantly. And I have my keychain is also Cheshire Cat. Cheshire Cat's a long-time favorite character of mine. Both from the Disney animated movie, and then also from Lewis Carroll's original books, Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. I tend to be drawn to really charismatic characters, which I think Cheshire Cat counts as. But he's also it feels weird to say this about a character from something that's obviously child's media, but he's kind of an asshole. He's I feel this is something that a lot of adaptations of Alice in Wonderland really struggle to get right. But the Cheshire Cat is a very selfish character. Like, he kind of shows up and like bugs Alice and like helps her a little bit, but for the most part, he's just kind of there doing his own thing because he finds himself entertaining. And also, he's a very entertaining character. Like, he can just like appear and disappear. He's got like the famous smile. His color scheme in like the Disney animated movie is also really fun. Gotta love the like pink and purple. Pretty sure I have a Cheshire Cat Halloween costume somewhere in my house as well.
That's pretty cool.
And a onesie. I have a onesie too. But yeah, he's just a really fun, charismatic character that I've loved for a really long time. And I'm having a really hard time explaining why.
Yeah. All right. I guess we'll pass it over to Gabe now. What's your first pick, dude?
I was sort of debating which one I'm going to go with for my first pick. But my first pick is King Bradley from Full Metal Alchemist, specifically the Brotherhood version of King Bradley, which is Wrath. He's like sort of in an antithesis to Armstrong. This is a character who's like a villainous character throughout the entire series and has like a kind of perfect villain qualities. He's not even the main villain, but I would say like he's kind of the perfect villain for a story. He's like, he has gravitas. He has this immense weight to his actions and his words. He has very strong convictions. He's kind of mysterious. He has a great design. He can, like even for like especially for an anime, that sort of does like the sort of Tom Selleck look he has going on is very unique. It's not something that I'm especially used to seeing in a character who has like this kind of role in a story. Usually like anime villains, you know how anime villains are. They're very Sephiroth. They're very Seto Kaiba. They're like thin boys, cool boys with cool hair. But Bradley is like this big, muscular guy with a mustache and an eye patch. He looks like a Hollywood movie villain, and he looks great doing it. I know you're not a dub guy, but Ed Blabeck's voice for Bradley in the dub is exquisite.
Well, I mean, on dubs versus subs, we all know how I feel, like how I am about that. Anyway,
every scene with Bradley is like this game. It's like this game of who's gonna fucking die in this room. Like he emits this like threatening energy in every scene he's in, more so than even like the main villains of the series. When the main villains show up, they're like, you sort of have this expectation, like, you know, they're not going to win this because they're the main villain. Of course they can't win. But Bradley is more like a recurring villainous character throughout the series. So there's always this threat of like, all right, is this going to be the scene where a character like tragically, horribly dies? And like based on just who he is as a person, you know that very well could happen. He's a fucking beast. In the last arc of Brotherhood, wait, have you guys watched, before I get into that, have you guys watched Brotherhood?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, hell yeah. Like in that last fucking stretch, after he just gets his ass kicked over and over again, and he just like keeps fucking showing up, and every time he shows up just a little bit more beaten up, but you never get the sense that he's become less threatening. I think there's even a line where like he shows up, his eye has been shot out, he's like bleeding from the chest from getting stabbed multiple times, he was blown out of his train cart, and one of the guys is like, he faces off against Scar and Mustang and everyone, and one of the guys is like, I don't even think all of us in this, like, in his state, I don't even think all of us could still take him down. Like, I don't know, he's just such a unique villain character, and he's so interesting. He has such an interesting philosophy. He has such interesting philosophies anytime he like, I don't know, I just love him so much. He's like one of my favorite villains in any anime.
All right, I guess let's move on to our next set of picks. And mine, despite everything that so I guess before I begin, it is a Throne of Glass character, but it's not the Throne of Glass character that I have stated on record that I would let step on my throat. I'm just putting that out there. It's not her.
Well, Wait, so we're not gonna be talking about Mana right now?
I mean, you can if you want. Just
The point is, I'm leaving, Dean.
So the Throne of Glass character that I'm going to be talking about is Aelin, who is the main, who is the protagonist of the entire series. And I know that that's like, considering Manon exists, or Manon exists, like, you know, why would I be talking about Aelin, especially because I also have Alex in the call. But I love Aelin, I love her story, and I think, like, if I could really break it down, I think Aelin is first introduced as Selena, and I guess that's a bit of a spoiler, but I guess as long as I'm not talking about Manon, then Gabe doesn't care. There's certainly, like, I like Selena, but not as much as I love Aelin, and I guess the reason why I say why I only like Selena is because to me, there were times where she felt a little bit too one note. Like, it felt like, you know, she had some, she definitely had a lot of swagger to her, and she had a lot of personality, but at the same time, she still, like, she flirted but never entertained a lot of ideas of her relationship yet. And I think, like, because she was guarding herself from who she really is, then we couldn't really see that, which I guess is good on, you know, Sarah J. Maas's part, but at the same time, it's like when she starts embracing who she really is as, you know, as Aelin, then that's when she really comes out a little bit more, when she starts being a little bit more proud of where she, of who she is, basically. Like, she embraces the swagger and the, like, her cunningness a lot more. She embraces, I guess, her feelings and her emotions a lot more, and that eventually leads into, you know, friendships with Lysandra, her relationship with Adian, her cousin, I don't remember, and, like, I think more importantly, her relationship with Rowan. When she becomes who she really is, then that's when I love her a lot more. Like, she really does come into her own. Like, I know that, you know, there are a whole list of other characters that kind of come into the series and kind of grab your attention, but Aelin's is the one that I guess is consistently the one that kind of keeps everyone intertwined, and it's the one that's the most, there's so much to it. Like she really is a protagonist with so much on her shoulders, right? And for her being like only like 19 in this, like 18, 19 at the introduction of the series, like that's a lot of responsibility. And like for someone who I guess why I love Aelin a lot is because when she faces a lot of these responsibilities, like she isn't like the definition of perfection when it comes to these things. Like she makes rash decisions, and she has to own up to it, and she understands consequence, and that's what I appreciate about her. And anyway, I'll pass it over to Alex now for her second pick, which is...
Oh boy. Okay. My second pick, I'm going like a lot more obscure. So the character that I'm going to talk about, her name is Renee Walker, and she's from the book series All for the Game by Nora Sakovic. I don't think I'm pronouncing that name right, but that's fine because it's a pen name. So just because I'm assuming that neither of you have heard of them, All for the Game is about, it's about this character named Neil Jostin. He plays this fictional sport called Exy, which is like it sounds really like odd and like weird on the surface. Like I'm not really a sports person. But the books aren't just about sports.
So like what I'm thinking in terms of like what you just said is like, oh, I'm not a sports person, so I probably am describing it like weirdly or something. And I'm thinking like, is she seriously just about to explain basketball?
No,
just under a different name or something? I'm like,
this mystical fictional sport, basketball.
A fictional sport called Exy. It's like described as like a mix between like lacrosse and soccer on like a football-sized field, I want to say. And like I said, like they start off as like sport books, but then you find out that like the main character is kind of involved with like the criminal underground. There's a lot of murder. But yeah, so Renee is one of the characters on Neil's XE team. Like he starts playing for like a college team, and she's one of the characters on the team. The teams are like mixed gender for reasons, and so Renee is one of the goalies on the team. First of all, her description of like her character is really cool. She's got like white hair, like cut to like chin length with like, and the bottom is dyed in like pastel rainbow, which I always thought was really cool. Because, you know, I mean, I'm just one of those people who thinks anyone with dyed hair looks really cool. So she's got a cool character design. She's an absolute sweetheart. She's like one of the nicest characters in the book. Like pretty much all of the characters that are on Neil's team have like tragic backstory galore. Like they come from like abusive homes and stuff. And Renee's no different, but she's at this point in her life, she's like come to a point where she's accepted that she had a bad past, and has embraced kind of a new life and is trying to like help other people get out of a bad place. So she's like a massive sweetheart. She's religious as well, but she's not like, which I tend to have a hard time with religious characters in books when they're made like explicitly religious, because I've had like my own bad experiences with that in my real life. But she's a Christian girl. She's using her faith to like try and help people come out of bad situations. She's also, she knows how to fight with a knife, which I always appreciate in a character as well. And she's just a really cool character. She comes off as like really like innocent and sweet on the surface, but then you get to know more about her and you realize, like, you learn about her past and you realize that she's really tough. Like if you were to take her on in a fight, you would probably lose.
Cool. All right. Well, I guess with that being said, let's hand it over to Gabe for his second pick.
Well, Alex mentioned something interesting earlier when you guys were discussing Aelin, about Aelin being like super overpowered and it sort of breaking like the tension in the story when she just is as overpowered as she is. And that made me think of my favorite character, who is from an action shonen, my boy Egg Boy Saitama.
Yes,
Hell yeah.
The ultimate overpowered boy. A character so overpowered that it goes around losing tension and comes back around to being entertaining again.
Yeah.
One Punch Man is so fucking good. One Punch Man is one of those animes I don't even think, it's not even a matter of like whether or not everyone likes it. I'm pretty sure every single person I know has seen and loves One Punch Man. I've only watched the anime, but I like the way that it handles his overpoweredness from a narrative perspective is also pretty genius. And like the fact that it takes the show and is like, it's sort of a writer's dilemma. They've created this concept of like, okay, there's this man and he destroys all enemies with a single punch. How do we write a compelling narrative based on that? Like, just not just from it being a funny show, but like a good story as well. Because I do legitimately think One Punch Man has a solid story wrapped around its fucking hilarious visual comedy. The fact that he's so reliant on his strength is like now to his detriment, because he's kind of an idiot and completely flubs a written exam and is bunked down into C rank because of it. Like it's so interesting how it takes a story that should on paper be very uncompelling and uninteresting and just like oh, I wonder if he'll beat the bad guy. Oh, he did, and make it interesting through having Saitama have like unique character-based problems that he has to face, in spite of the fact that he's incredibly powerful, because these are problems that can't just be one punched.
Yeah.
It's good shit.
All right. Before we go down that inevitable rabbit hole, let's round up our final picks. And my final pick for I guess technically my sixth favorite character, but she is my favorite character of all time in regards to the show that I'm talking about. She is Toph from Avatar: The Last Airbender.
Yeah, boy.
Like, I really don't want to spend too much time talking about Toph because I'm pretty sure anyone who's watched the series knows just how much of a badass Toph is. Like, she's like, for someone who is she's blind, she's 12, and she comes from a very rich family, so like odds are she would have been protected all her life. Instead, her technical debut into the show was as the one who would teach Aang earthbending. And when she actually gets introduced, she is fighting a bunch of other people, or a bunch of earthbenders in a tournament, and she sweeps through the entire thing. Amazing. Absolutely amazing. Like, her design kicks ass. Like, her jokes are on point, especially when, you know, she jokes about her being blind. Hilarious. Absolutely hilarious. Like, and that's not to discredit, like, you know, like, she has some of the most badass moments in the show. Like, she, I guess rating
metal bending.
Yeah, I was gonna get to that. So yeah, metal bending, definitely, like, that's incredible. I guess the raid onto the Fire Nation capital, and like how she just completely changes all the steps into one giant slide. Awesome. What other things? Like, I guess, like, anytime she would go into like a suit full of like a rock armor suit or something, like, awesome.
Fucking holding up the tower in the desert.
Yeah, that's I guess that's the biggest image that kind of sticks with me in terms of like Toph's big badass moments, like holding up a literal tower, like from collapsing, like
As being sucked into the spirit realm.
Yeah, like, what a badass. Like I thought she was a badass when I was like 5-6, and I think of her still as a badass at 22, because I guess, like, she is the embodiment of like being able to do so much when you've been given so little in life. Like, she's made being blind not a like, her being blind isn't a hindrance. It's more of a strength that works in her favor. And I guess in terms of hindrances, like, it's a hindrance to everyone who's fucking facing her, because she's gonna whoop your ass, dude. So yeah, Toph Beifong, best character in Avatar, bar none. So, Alex, who is your third and final pick for part 2?
Okay. It's my turn to go into the world of anime. My favorite anime character, probably of all time, is Death the Kid from Soul Eater.
Ooh, nice.
I really like Soul Eater, actually, just because I think it does a really good job of balancing like the really serious parts of the story with the humor. And I think Death the Kid is a really good example of that, because, you know, he's like this incredibly powerful dude. He's literally like a death god. He's got 2 like guns that he can use, and he's got all these like cool abilities and stuff. And then he just has like this need for everything to be absolutely perfect, to the point that if, like, literally in the first episode you meet him, he's like, oh, I think I left like the toilet paper crooked or something, and literally leaves the temple that he's like exploring or whatever it is. It's been too long since I watched it, but he leaves like the place he's at, leaves his 2 weapons there alone, and goes back home to double check that like the frame isn't crooked or whatever it is.
Yeah,
it's so funny. But then he's really powerful, which is cool. He has a really cool design. I always love the white stripes in his hair, and he's got like the perfect like, black and white aesthetic. And, like, the symmetry is so nice. and then he also like you can tell he grows to care about his friends over time as the story progresses, and they become like a really good, solid team that's able to work together by the end of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's just a fun character.
All right, Gabe, what is your final pick?
I'm sure. Okay, I've talked about this game enough where I'm sure some part of you, Dean, was expecting me to gush about a character from it at some point. We've talked about it twice, and the two times that we recorded our video game podcast. So my last character is A2 from Nier Automata, scattered in between a lot of the main plot elements between 2B and 9S and the two machine leaders that they go up against. There's this one character who shows up very briefly during just one mission, and she's like a subversive, I guess, that you just find in notes and stuff, and characters randomly talking about her, and that's A2. And A2 is this sort of rogue android character who is like wanted by Yorha for sort of betraying them. She's a traitor. She's killed other androids. She's basically she's like known as a war criminal, and her whole deal is she was the very first built android, so she's like the prototype, and ever since her first combat mission, she's basically been going against Yorha because in her first mission she basically figured out a lot of the late game plot twist stuff that 9S figures out later on, having to do with like there being a the cycle of violence and a cycle of war. And her whole thing is that she's on like this mad vengeance quest to basically wipe out all the machines, probably wipe out all of Yorha, and restore humanity on Earth by herself. It's a very bizarre like sort of thing that it establishes later on, and becomes even stranger when she becomes one of the three playable protagonists in the game later on in the sea roads.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, I just find her super interesting to play as. Like her design is cool too. She has like lines and shit all across her body, which are like, I guess, the plates and stuff, because she's a prototype, so like they hadn't worked out all the quirks in designing their androids yet, so it's a little more obvious that she's like not an actual person, that she's just a metal skeleton with like imitation skin slapped onto it.
Yeah, like the symbolism of like being the first one, and I guess being the broken one. Like I love the symbolism behind that. Like
yeah, and like emotionally too. She's not like a disturbed person or like a quiet person. Like one of the things I was so nervous about with her character was that I was going to play as her, and she was going to be like a I don't know how to phrase this, not like a nothing personal kid type character.
Yeah,
but she isn't that at all. Her whole deal is that she's kind of an aggro asshole, and this shows like how her character plays as well. She plays differently than how you played the game so far up to that point, in a way that's actually slightly shittier, which makes total sense because she's a prototype and they haven't worked out all the kinks. So playing the game as her is much harder because she's a worse fighter than either of the characters you've played as up to that point. Mm-hmm. But her goals are so much more ambitious than either of 2B's or 9S's, because she's basically planning to put an end to the war, whereas 9S and 2B are just fighters in the war.
Yeah. I guess with that all being said, this should come to the end of part 2. Thanks guys for joining me and discussing your favorite characters. Definitely I'd love to do a follow-up on it. And thanks to everyone who's been listening. You guys like know where to find us. Our social media would be down in the description below, as on top of like, you know, where to find our personal Instagram, social media, all that stuff. Maybe some information on upcoming projects. I don't know yet, but we'll see. With all this being said, thanks everyone for tuning in. We'll see you on the next episode, whatever we end up discussing. So yeah, that's it from us. Have a good night, everyone. Goodbye.
Peace.
Good night. Bye.